On the night of May 22, 1870, in the quiet village of Denham, a family was torn apart by one of Victorian Britain's most brutal crimes. Emmanuel Marshall, a blacksmith, lived beside his forge with his wife Charlotte, his mother, his sister, and 4 young children. On the morning of May 23, no one had come outside the Marshall home, which was unusual. When neighbors forced the door open, they found 7 bodies. Every member of the family had been bludgeoned to death with either an axe or sledgehammer. Marshall lay dead in the forge, his skull crushed. Suspicion soon focused on John Owen, a former blacksmith who had worked for Marshall. Owen believed Marshall owed him money and had openly sworn to murder him. Owen was soon arrested. He showed no remorse, adding that he wished he had killed the arresting officer too. John Owen was hanged in August 1870 for his frenzied murder spree. While the world watched Jack the Ripper, another killer was using the River Thames as a graveyard. Between 1887 and 1889, London was haunted by the Thames Torso murders, a series of killings so methodical they made the Ripper look like an amateur. This killer didn't just murder, he dismantled his victims' bodies. 4 women were found across the city, their remains pulled from the river or found at construction sites and under railway arches. A headless torso was even discovered in the basement of the new Scotland Yard building. The killer literally left one of his victims at the police's front door. Only one victim, Elizabeth Jackson, was ever identified. The rest remain nameless to this day. The precision of the cut suggested a surgeon or a butcher, but the trail always went cold. Experts believe this wasn't the Ripper, the MO was too different. No one was ever caught, and the identity of the torso killer remains one of history's most chilling and forgotten cold cases.
William Palmer was the greatest villain to ever stand trial.
Also known as the Rugeley Poisoner, was a 19th century surgeon who turned his medical knowledge into a weapon. Driven by massive gambling debts, he allegedly poisoned his way through his own family, including 4 of his infant children, his mother-in-law, and his wife, to collect on their life insurances. His downfall came in 1855 after the death of his friend, John Cook. After Cook won big at the races, Palmer reportedly poisoned his friend with strychnine to steal his winnings. During Cook's autopsy, Palmer even tried to sabotage the evidence by stealing the stomach contents. Despite his interference, he was convicted in a trial so famous that Parliament had to change the law just to move it to London for a fair hearing. In 1856, 30,000 people watched him hang in Stafford. "Are you sure this trapdoor is safe?" asked the Prince of Poisoners before he was hanged, ending the career of a man who callously traded people's lives for betting slips. She was just an everyday Victorian London woman, but her raging jealousy turned her into a double murderess. Mary had become involved with Frank Hogg, who later married Phoebe Styles, at Mary's urging, after she became pregnant by Frank. One afternoon in October, Phoebe was invited to visit Mary with her baby. Neighbors later reported hearing screams, and by that evening Phoebe's battered body was found dumped on a rubbish tip in Hampstead. Phoebe's skull had been crushed, while her child was found dead in Finchley, apparently smothered. A black pram turned up about a mile away, and witnesses said Pearcey was seen pushing the pram through North London after dark. Police found extensive blood spatter, plus a poker and carving knife, with hair and blood at Mary's home. When questioned, she claimed she'd been killing mice. Mary Pearcey was convicted of killing Phoebe Hogg and Tiggy on the 24th of October, 1890. She insisted she was innocent, but was convicted and hanged at Newgate just 2 months later, on the 23rd of December 1890. £12,000 of gold, stolen from a train in the night, and nobody noticed. It's 1855, banks are moving gold bullion locked in iron safes from London to other banks. William Pierce, a previous employee, still knew every schedule, every lock, every weakness. So he recruited Edward Agar, a top safe cracker, and 2 men on the inside, James Burgess and William Tester, a senior clerk, who pressed the safe keys into wax. On the 15th of May, the gold train left London. The gang boarded mid-route and swapped the gold for lead shot. Bankers opened the safes days later, only to realize they'd been robbed. The gang should have got away with it. But Agar was unluckily arrested and jailed for a previous crime. His partners then refused to pay Pierce's share to his girlfriend, so she told the police everything and Agar turned Queen's evidence. In January 1857, the Old Bailey convicted Pierce, Burgess, and Tester. They got between 10 to 14 years in prison each. A near-perfect Victorian train robbery, undone by greed. In 1877, Matilda Hacker, an eccentric, wealthy recluse, vanished from her London boarding house. The landlord, Severino Barstendoff, claimed she'd skipped out on her rent, yet her property remained in her room. 2 years later, a workman cleaning out the coal cellar found the remains of Matilda. She had been strangled. Suspicion fell on the housemaid, Hannah Dobbs, as it was discovered that she had pawned Matilda's jewelry. But as the trial began, the case took a scandalous turn. Hannah didn't just plead innocent, she claimed that she and Barstendorf were secret lovers, and that he was the killer. Suddenly, the courtroom was dissecting the morals of the entire boarding house. Was Hannah a calculated thief, or a pawn in a cover-up? Despite the stolen goods, the jury made a choice that stunned the public. Hannah Dobbs walked free, and later her landlord Barstendorf and his brother Peter were cited as knowing more than they let on, and possibly used Dobbs to sell off Matilda's goods. The Euston Square mystery still remains officially unsolved to this day. They poisoned Britain's food, and they're still doing it. In Victorian Britain, almost everything you ate was adulterated. It didn't matter whether you were a lowly docker in Whitechapel or a lord in Mayfair, it affected everyone. Your bread had chalk and plaster in it. Your sweets were coloured with arsenic-based dye. Your milk was mostly water. Your coffee was bulked out with peas and beans. And the beer? By the time it reached the pub, it had been diluted and dosed with sulfuric acid, salt, and a plant-derived intoxicant. Scientists at the time tested thousands of food samples and found 65% contained dangerous adulterants. The government knew, but the food industry lobbied for 40 years to block regulation. When they finally acted in 1860, the fine was just £5. Does that sound familiar? Because right now the WHO has officially classified bacon as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same category as asbestos, and the food industry is still lobbying governments to do absolutely nothing about it. Some things never change. He had his ship scuttled on purpose, and he was about to collect the insurance money. In 1869, merchant seaman Thomas Donahue overinsured the cargo aboard the vessel SS Conflict, bribed 2 crew members, and had the ship deliberately scuttled off the Welsh coast. The plan nearly worked. It fell apart when one of the crew members talked. At trial, the full scheme was laid out in court: the bribes, the paperwork, the calculated timing. What made it worse for the insurers was how easy the scam had been. Lloyd's of London had no standardized system for verifying cargo manifests at the time, which meant a determined fraudster with the right contacts could overinsure almost anything and arrange for it to disappear. The case pushed Lloyd's to introduce the first formal cargo verification protocols, a direct institutional response to one man's audacity and one crew member's loose tongue. 3 expert fellows of the Royal Academy looked at the drawings and said they were genuine. But they were wrong. In 1892, a minor London clerk had been producing convincing forgeries of old master drawings and selling them through respectable Bond Street dealers for a handsome profit. The works had been examined, authenticated, and catalogued. It was only a Sotheby's cataloguer who noticed there was something wrong with the paper stock, and by then several pieces had already changed hands at significant prices. At trial, the expert's humiliation was the centerpiece attraction. 3 Royal Academicians had each independently authenticated forgeries made by a clerk with no formal training. None of the experts faced any consequences. The forger was convicted, and the experts went back to their studios. The case raised an uncomfortable question that nobody in the art world particularly wanted answered. If the best eyes in the country could be fooled this completely, how many others had slipped through the net? During the summer of 1851, Norwich had been gripped by the discovery of human remains scattered across the city. For 18 years, William Sheward carried a secret that eventually became heavier than his own life. On New Year's night in 1869, the 57-year-old publican got drunk and then walked into a London police station and confessed to the murder of his first wife, Martha. "I can keep it no longer," he admitted, claiming that God had prevented him from taking his own life, and so he was surrendering to his guilt instead. Despite his defense arguing that his confession was merely a delusion, a jury found him guilty in just 45 minutes. Even a bizarre wave of anonymous letters, including one purportedly written by the living Martha, could not stop the gallows. On April 20th, Sheward was hanged at Norwich jail. Before his death, he left no doubt of his guilt, providing a final, gruesome confession of how he had dismembered his wife nearly 2 decades earlier.